Welcome to the J3U University Podcast. I'm your host, John Jewett.
And I'm your co-host, Luke Miller.
Our mission is to elevate the physique coaching standard
and to bring the highest level of competitor to the stage.
Let's jump into today's episode. When a check-in goes off the rails, if you're an athlete or you're a coach, this is probably going to cross your desk at some point. The athlete side, hopefully not, but life happens and there's going to be a varying degree spectrum of what quote unquote is a bad check-in. But if you're a coach, now you enter the realm of highly possible you're going to get this check-in where you're reading, you're like, I didn't even know this was possible to happen. And you're going to have to address it. So Luke and I are going to go through, what do you do when the check-in goes off the rails? How do you bring the client back in? How do you manage the situation? And then get them back to a place of productivity.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different ways this can happen. And I don't think this is just the late check-in. And I think that's kind of the clarity that needs to be kind of prefaced with is there's so much that could go into this off check-in that could drive issues with the process that you need to address. And sometimes, and we'll talk about this, John, you know this, you have to read between the lines, people who are not the most forthcoming. You have to read between the lines and then poke and prod with questions. Any of my clients watching this know that I've responded to them with emails, prodding questions to get more out of them before, if they aren't typically the most communicative. But sometimes it's in between the lines. Sometimes it's understanding the context of the phase that they're in, whether that be the phase of life or the phase of what could potentially go wrong, whether it's an off season or a contest prep or anything along those lines. So there's a lot of context clues. And I think of it this way because as coaches, we can be very X and O and try to be as objective as possible. But there does have to be some sort of emotive perspective or emotional adept perspective to be able to start to read people in this scenario.
Yeah, and that ability is something that you're going to have to probably gain over time. And it's really, I feel like in these situations is where the coach leadership role really shines, because giving someone a nutrition plan or a training plan, that is the X's and O's. But true coaching is where you connect on that emotional level and trying to build that person up as an athlete, as just an overall human, into that better version of themselves. And so that's where you really need, when someone is starting to go astray, take the leadership role and bring them back into where they need to be and meet them in that place. And I think within a lot of this, the coaching realm, especially coming from bodybuilding or even the athletic background, maybe even from the 90s, early 2000s era of athlete coach, it's a really just push them hard and get your crap together, suck it up, let's go. And if that's your only tool and lever to pull, you're going to fall short in a lot of areas. And by no means am I trying to be we all need to be a little softer, but everyone's going to respond differently to different, how you're going to be addressing their situation and then bringing them back in. So I just spoke with, a newer client that I was onboarding, and he had that same approach from his last coach of he had fallen short in a prep and had that strong arm of hey man, get it together. What are you doing? And it kind of sent him backwards and not what he needed to hear in that moment. He needed more of let's focus on the positive and push this forward. And that would have been the opposite of what he needed, to just keep him moving the needle. But anyway, with the check-in that can come in, it's a variety of things that we could see, which it might just be the scale weight jumped up, 4 or 5 pounds, and there's check-ins where nothing's mentioned and you're left just looking at it why is their body weight scaling up, right? And you're just I don't know, what would happen. That's when Luke mentions there's the 21 questions going off of, okay, why did this went up, and did some extra food go in? You're trying to balance the conversation of not just saying, are you cheating on your diet? Then, sleep is just tanked for some reason. We see the log of like 4 hours of sleep, and then we have the check-in that comes in at like 3 a.m. or the opposite. It comes in at like midnight that day. This work life happens, and you read through someone's like whole life story of what was going on for the day. And then there's digestive issues that could be occurring, or even issues around PDs that weren't a problem. Like, I've heard all types of stories around gear usage. Like, I ran out of this, I had to go bum some other compound, and now I did an injection, and now I have this like soreness and redness, and they send you a picture of it.
It's like infected.
It's just a list of like what this bad check-in could be, and you're always trying to troubleshoot. So I think the thing is like, what typically leads to this? And I'll throw this back to you, Luke. Like, in all this, and maybe earlier on your coaching, or heck, even from other coaching process that you've seen, are there early signs to this, or ways to set up the coaching process that could to at least limit some of this from happening?
Yeah, so there's definitely early signs. I think some of the earlier signs that you'll start to see would be, one, data not adding up. Like, that's an obvious one. I think that's a pretty quick one to pick up on. The non-quicker ones are the trailing off of the tracking. So you'll notice like one or two things start to not get tracked, or you'll notice that the description of their week gets a little bit shorter. If for those of you familiar with my check-in process, I have a couple boxes at the bottom where it goes into like, what did you do well this week? What did you not do well? And then a description of the week. And you'll see like kind of the first couple months, people will fill out all 3 boxes, and then the next month they'll only fill out 2, and then the next month they only fill out 1. So you see this like trail off of like how disciplined they are with the check-in process. And I think a lot of what this comes down to, in order to keep yourself ahead of the curve, is finding out how a client communicates. Because there's multiple different ways that people communicate, and you can see this with kind of typically the first month or two of check-ins. Sometimes they just don't give you enough, and they consistently don't give you enough through written. And that's okay, because I have some people who send voice notes. I have some people who send looms. I have some people who just do the written. And so I've found that kind of finding that is the quickest way to get ahead of the curve, because life's going to happen. And that's the thing, is you're going to be in a contest prep that you have to push someone hard. They're going to have curveballs sent to them in their life perspective. And if you set them up for success with the system that makes it easiest for them to communicate, it makes it much easier to do your job.
Do you think within like off season or even a contest prep situation that there's a form of coaching, maybe with the timeline, that could lead someone an easier setup to someone like go off the rails like that? Like, I'm thinking maybe too aggressive of a prep timeline, or maybe just the front end work wasn't there in the initial QA to pick up on things of like, this person's not ready for this phase.
Yeah, I think on the onboarding process, there's a lot of details that have to be covered, because frustration will be one that drives this lack of communication. Like, if you're not extremely detailed in the onboarding process and your plans don't address everything that they're looking to get addressed, that'll be a really quick one. I've seen a lot of people come into our coaching business after just a few months of working with someone else that's literally just that situation there. I think expectation management would be more so the thing around the timeline, because it's hard to explain to people the expectations of phases if they've never executed at a certain level. So like, if they haven't executed at the level that you execute at, but that's what it's going to take for them to get them to the next level, it is going to be super challenging for them to change all of their life variables in order to get to that. And so if we do that from the forefront of expectation of like, hey, this is the groundwork or the barriers in which we operate in, and in order to achieve your goal, we have to operate within these barriers, whether it's, I mapped this out for 24 weeks for a prep timeline because I want to see this rate of loss so that you're ready at this point so I can do some peak testing and then lead you into the peak. Or whether it's like body composition management in the off season in the same flow of thought that you do for a rate of gain. If they don't have those expectations set from the forefront, that's just going to lead to more frustration both directions. And you're going to have to keep having that, well, what are you doing conversation? And then they're going to feel like you didn't lay out those expectations on the forefront.
Yeah, I could see that. Setting the expectation is clear. I think with some people, they've already created their own expectations and what they want out of the coaching process. In this modern day of coaching, it seems like it's very, athlete focused, as it should be, and athlete driven with the process, right? Like now we look at coaching as like we have a lot of tools to be able to coach people in different ways. So, hey, I want this more flexible macro plan, or same with like training plans. I want to be able to log in an app or not in an app, right? Or whatever it may be. And you end up trying to accommodate this person, but it shifts them back into the patterns they're used to that they keep failing at. And so I think there's a balance to strike here, and you're in like initially assessing someone to make sure that you don't let them go back into a pattern that they're just comfortable with. That sets them up for failure, and where it's going to prevent you from coaching them as you need. And just an example of this is like, I've had some people that have been, tracking macros and are pretty proficient at it, but it falls apart in contest prep because they also don't know how to like maintain just a reasonable structure in the off season and need all these like different fun and crazy foods present. And so like allowing them to keep doing that, they never gain the skills of being able to just stay adherent within a little bit more rigid of a structure, to where they're not set up right. So I think part of like the initial with a client in assessing them is making sure that, the flexibility is there, but it's also going to be setting them up for their goal that they have laid out in the future as well.
Yeah, I think to kind of push this conversation a bit further forward, I think you can go a long ways with how you react to this check-in. And this is something that, pat myself on the back here for a bit. I have worked extremely hard at doing this well. And I feel like this is a part of my coaching that I really kind of lean on a lot, is the ability to be able to communicate someone with where they're at, because the way that you talk sets the tone for the conversation. Okay. And this is where, for those of you that are the coaches here, or if you're the client looking for what are kind of traits or aspects of a coach that are pretty good, the way that you approach this and understanding that they need to know you care about them being the best version of themselves is massive. And understanding that you can't change things that have already happened in the past is another thing that's massive in this conversation. And so the way that you kind of come in here with curiosity and understanding, validating that this is an open place to be able to talk, and then moving someone into ownership of the actions by saying, these are the things that we can do to prevent this from happening in the future. So giving them a vision of progress is an unbelievable way to not only manage it in the situation when something goes wrong, but also try to build them up to be more successful in the next time that a challenge presents itself. And usually this is in the confines of a contest prep is where you see it the most often, like someone falls off plan or binges or whatever it might be, or something keeps them from executing at some level. But there's times in the off season this happens too. And the way that you approach that conversation is so huge, because like guards and walls can go up so quick if you're not careful.
And then you close off the conversation the next time it's going to happen, right? So I think with that, and I see it in different types of athletes already, the response is different. Like I have some really high executors that just nail it every single week. Like they live the life, right? And so for them, like when something does go off the rails, by the time they already check in, they've already beat themselves up so bad, and they know what it looks like to fix it. And a lot of times I think with the high executor, it's something that was out of their control, but to them, that's the failure. And I think letting them know that the success is when we are all going to face adversity, that's how you deal with it. Like you make the best of that day and you don't let it just keep spiraling. Right. And so for that individual, like you don't need to be the aggressive one that pushes them. Like, hey man, you need to get it together. It's like, they know that, and they've already punished themselves enough. So there's that client, but then there's the client too, that is going to be emotionally beat down and in a really depressed place, that might need to be like brought up out of a hole. Like there's people that can spiral down to like a degree of depression. Like, do you want to beat that person down? But there is like the real whimsical person that just needs to be drawn back in. That's the person that's probably never really checked in on point to begin with. And that might always need like, come on, man, let's, put it together. And I think the one that you need to set even harsher expectations with, of like, to coach you and align with your goals, you need to do X, Y, and Z. If you're not doing X, Y, and Z, there's only so many of these check-ins that we can do until I'm not able to coach you towards that goal. And so I think it's letting them realize that you're not just going to be the accountability buddy every week. If you're not able to coach them, they're not that coachable. They're not ready for this level. So there's a spectrum there to work within, and that language that you're using with all those different types of clients is going to vary. And I think if you're just don't know where to start with the client and you see some strange check-in come to you, is throw it back to the client first so you can gain understanding of where they are at. So if something doesn't add up to you, send a voice message back to them like, hey, this seemed out of character or out of place in your check-in when normally I haven't seen it. Like, could you explain that a bit further for me? What felt different this week, or why did this happen? And tell them, like, send me a voice memo if you don't mind. If it's something that off, I don't want it written because it can be so misconstrued. I've even had check-ins come in that was typed, and the way I read it was just interpreted wrong by me. And maybe they even mistyped something. And so you jump to assumptions. So you have to remove yourself emotionally a bit and don't put on just these, negative assumptions onto your client. Give them the chance to like rectify and speak. And once you hear that back, it might get you gain a little bit more perspective of where they're at. Then you can give the appropriate response to meet that client and move them in the direction that they need to. Thanks everyone for tuning in to today's podcast. Are you struggling to hit your peak on show day? Feeling lost in the off season? Upgrade your coaching game with J3U University. Our program covers everything from off season to contest prep to peak week, all based from real client results. Along with our comprehensive physique curriculum, you'll also get access to our 4 rooms with our J3U team to answer any questions you have, and live Q&A sessions to further your coaching and athlete experience. We are the source of education for top IFBB pros and coaches. Join us to elevate the coaching standard at J3 University. Let's get back to today's podcast.
Yeah, and I think that initial, like, giving them the open forum to be able to do this is huge. There's multiple different ways to do it depending on how you communicate as an individual. Like, I'm very verbal. A lot of my clients know, like, I'll just call them or like get on a Zoom call. Like, hey, I'm sitting at my desk for the next 3 hours. Hop on the Zoom call when you can, or something along these lines, because it's just something that I feel like we verbally need to hash out, or you can send that voice note. But when you do kind of get that feedback back, a lot of it's reframing expectations, because we have to get to a place where we're back to the objective problem solving. And so identify what they did that they could have controlled, identify the things that they couldn't control so that they understand the difference between the two, and how we are able to use our actions to affect the things that we can control, and then let the things that we can't fall off of our back. And this is how we start to kind of learn to teach someone, we start to guide people and teach someone to be able to go through this identification process so that we can get them back to problem solving. Because most of the time, or a lot of the time when this happens, people are in a overwhelming, anxiety-ridden panic state of some sort, whether it's they're anxious about the fact that they made a mistake, or they're anxious about the fact the environment has changed and it could lead them to making a mistake. And the quicker we can get them to learn how to identify the controllables, control those controllables, and get them back into problem-solving mode, the better they're going to be able to manage it on their own without you having to be there. And I think that kind of brings us to that like problem-solving skill set of how do we go about problem-solving, because that's kind of the whole point of guiding a check-in back for someone.
Yeah, and that you have the emotional aspect that you kind of already went through, but then it is getting back to the nuts and bolts of what your program actually looks like. So, what was the problem and what's the root issue? So that's what you're really trying to get down to. It's okay, you went off plan. Why did that happen? Well, I didn't have something prepared. Why wasn't it prepared? Well, my schedule changed. Does your schedule normally change? Yes, it does. We should have a backup in place just in case. Let's always have this whey protein and rice cakes or granola bar or nuts on hand in case you are out on the go and you don't have your prepped meal with you. So there we go. We identify the problem, the root issue, and then have, a way to address this. And like through that is like, that's the decision process that you should take with all these issues. And some things are going to be uncontrollables, and it might be an environmental change that's going to be sustained for a bit of time. So what's the problem? Oh man, I had a family member pass away, and I have to go sort whatever their living situation or deal with this, right? What's the time period here? Like, is that going to detract so much from this physique goal that they're headed to that we should just move them out of that phase altogether? Because that phase might be a contest prep where it's extremely demanding physically and mentally, and they're not just going to have the physical time to be allocate there or the mental capacity to allocate there. Let's move them to a phase where they can be successful, still nail the variables that we set, and deal with whatever that life situation might be. And so I've had to shift people out of phase where like, hey man, I'm not going to be able to nail my meals. Like this is like such a life encompassing thing that I have to deal with. It's like, okay, well, let's shift and we're going to go to maintenance. We're going to train 3 days a week or something like that and just see what they are capable of do. Now, this is kind of the extreme that we're getting to, right? Of like, we're just trying to make do here, but it can go, the point is that it can go from that to as simple as like, hey, just have like a pre-made meal with you. So, through all this, it's looking through all the variables that we have tracked. That's why, Luke and myself, we have more meticulous data tracking that we do with our athletes. So it's easier to pick up on what's the weak link in the chain, be able to ask the client about that and see what intervention that we can put in place. A lot of these pretty wild check-ins that happen too, a lot of times it's like, okay, this happened. Let's nail the plan this week. We're not going to change anything. We can see what happens with your physique, where it moves, and then reassess next week. And that's a lot of those check-ins that I get across the desk are like, I can't change the plan if you're not able to execute that plan. And I've already made all the changes to give someone all the ability to do it, and they're still not doing it. And that happens over, I usually go about 3 weeks of working that out. And if they're still like, I've done everything I can and they're still not, able to adhere to it, they're not at a point in their life for coaching. I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing my job. I'm doing too much is what I'm doing. I'm fighting for their goals more than they are. That's when it's time for them to like set coaching aside and then revisit it when they are in a better position to execute.
Yeah, it's a tough place to be in when you want it that bad for someone.
It can really eat you up emotionally. I think the earlier on, you definitely get probably a little too emotionally involved in your client's goals, and it's hard not to be for like how much you care about coaching in general and how much time you put into someone. For them to just drop the ball, it's tough because, it feels like you just got let down, and you're going to have to swallow that because that is what coaching is going to be. So I think you need to have a bit of just safeguarding, not letting yourself get too emotionally involved. And that's a tough one. And like coaching friends is a tough one too, because eventually the coaching boundaries and friendship boundaries get a little blurred and it lets things slip. Or if, coaching doesn't go the way that they wanted, expectations weren't met, or vice versa, like, man, it's ended friendships, right? So that's a tough one to manage. So, as in the coaching aspect, clear expectations and making sure those are listed out, and you always uphold some of that, to where as you do become more friendly, we still have to uphold this, because that's what's going to make us achieve our goals to the best of our ability. Anyway.
Yeah. There's one other thing that I kind of want to touch on with the fail check-in, because communication can be a big aspect of this. I think there's a few ways you can avoid this on a phase-dependent note. So people know this. I've spoken about this pretty publicly. Everybody that works with me, when they start a contest prep, they immediately move to twice-a-week check-ins. And it's not that it's necessarily needed in the first part of prep, right? Like, it's pretty just kind of you're taking smooth progressions, right? But the desire for keeping communication stable in a contest prep is extremely high for me, because it's where people get a bit more emotional. The deeper into contest prep that you go, the more, I don't want to say reactive, because not everybody's reactive in nature, but the more driven off emotion someone can be with the amount of effort that they're putting in. And keeping that line of communication very clear is extremely important. And a great way to do that is to increase the touch points with someone. So the more frequent touch points can allow you to pick up on things a little bit quicker. And I think this is one strategy in regards to kind of staying ahead of it that is massive. So because some people will understand who've been through prepping with me before, like in a contest prep, it goes from like the once a week check-ins in the off season to twice a week. And then the twice a week kind of goes to 3 times a week or every other day towards the back end. And then obviously, like, when the peaking process starts, it's daily. But it's so huge. Like, it can make or break preps, in my opinion, because you catch things so much faster, and you're able to be a better resource for them because you're keeping that line of communication clear.
Yeah, I do that post show too. Like, the check-in frequency still happens, because, man, post show, one day off plan to 2 days to 3 days, and then you check in. A lot can happen in 3 days. So keep it pretty frequent. And I even as a personal note, like on the athlete side of execution, like, I've been in preps where, man, you're checking in meal by meal with your coach, and felt so connected with the coach. And then all of a sudden the next week, your show's over, you're like back to work, and then you just have your coach like for one check-in. And it feels a bit empty, and it kind of has like this post-show blue feeling to it. Like, I almost need a weaning off of this attentive coaching process, in a sense. Not, I can execute, but in a way, for someone, if they were to really struggle with that, it can really kind of let the air out of your sails, coming from all this attention to like kind of having that drop off. But anyway, post-show, I think that's another one to keep the check-in frequency there. And then once you see someone mentally is in a good spot, for sure, physically they're starting to like, get more stable, then we kind of can move off seasons back to less frequent. But even then, I'm okay with keeping someone on a twice a week check-in on off season. Some people, they like that. And I've asked people like, hey, you're in a stable position. Like, I'm going to move you to once a week check-ins unless there's some reason you want to just check in twice a week. And I've had some people that want to, and that's okay. Like, a lot of ones just a touch point. And then we have like our main check-in day that we do.
Yeah. I have some off-season clients to do the same. I think it's important. And this is understanding your client part. I chuckled at the post-show comment, because you've seen the people who post-show, their check-in day, let's say, is Friday, and then Friday night they go out to eat and they blow it up, and they know they have all week to try to make it up and get back down to the weight that they're supposed to be trending at. Is like, you're trying to avoid that, because that's like post-show disaster right there. But yeah, it's so huge.
I've done this on closer clients to just. You got to have my own fun sometimes. If like they check in and they'll be like, yeah, I'm going out to whatever, have my off-plan meal tonight. I'm like, okay, cool. If you don't mind, check in tomorrow morning too. And like, they're like, wait, what? It's like, oh yeah, you better reel that meal back in. I was like, okay, this is usually the clients that like bump up pretty hard after an off-plan meal, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, also the check I don't like to see too is the one that, yeah, I went out and had my off-plan meal like last night. It's like, what? We're gonna be so inaccurate today. Like, what?
Yeah, I know.
But anyway, reeling this back in, I think, in all these moments, we're being like, can really separate you from just being a good coach, an average coach, to one that's really leading the way and building up your clients. Because in those moments where your clients are failing and just falling from your process and falling from their goals, if you're able to take them and bring them back and then push them forward and make that a development point, a learning point, they'll remember that forever. And I think it just goes even more. I know maybe someone's listening like, these guys are just talking about, building some muscle here and having people keep making the gains. But really, like, I think the coaching process is so much more than that. And it really is a self-development process of learning how to overcome challenges. And even though that's within like this bodybuilding space, I think it translates to all other areas. Because how many times have you set up to failure in life, and what do you do? Who do you reach out to? Like someone that beats you down more, someone that builds you up. Like, it could have a lot of different outcomes. And if you keep having these stumbles and failures and keep getting beat down, you don't really progress and see a lot of self-development. So to have that coach, that mentor that can take you and show you how to take this, what looked like a negative thing that happened, and bring it into something positive, is a huge leadership moment. I think it's a coaching development moment and an athlete development moment. So our goal here in J3U is just to elevate the standard of coaching. And that all starts with like how we treat people, how we coach people, and moving that forward. So I think this is a great one to listen to. I hope everyone had a lot of takeaways. Next week, we're going to dive into why your coaching system breaks when you're trying to scale up. So another little bit more of a coaching focus for those that, are just in that 10 to 15 client range, and shed some light on like what happens when you get to 20 to 25 clients, and the things that you had issues with at a smaller scale, it only will become worse. And so we'll give you some insights on how to set this up to be really effective as you grow larger in your coaching business. But thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.